Confidence. Everyone talks about it. Everyone wants it. And yet almost everyone misunderstands it. Most people imagine confidence as something loud, a booming laugh, a handshake that crushes bone, a voice that fills the room and demands attention. They think of the man who talks the most, brags the most, shines the brightest spotlight on himself. But here's the truth that isn't confidence. That's performance. That's theater. And deep down, people can sense the difference. Real confidence doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't scream for validation. In fact, true confidence is the exact opposite of what most people picture. It is silent, still, and unbothered. It is the quiet presence that doesn't ask for respect. It commands it without a word. Think about the last time you walked into a room and noticed someone who wasn't speaking, wasn't trying, wasn't performing, and yet, all eyes slowly gravitated toward them. You couldn't explain it. They weren't loud. They weren't animated. They were just there, calm, composed, nonchalant. And somehow, that was more magnetic than any flashy gesture could ever be. That is real confidence. The world is noisy. Everywhere you look, people are shouting to be noticed, performing for attention, desperate to prove their worth. Social media is filled with flexes, filtered lives, and fake confidence. But the man of true power doesn't play that game. He doesn't post to prove himself. He doesn't shout to be heard. He doesn't rush to explain. He doesn't scramble to defend. Instead, he does something far more terrifying. He stays still. Stillness unsettles people.
It breaks the rhythm of the world's chaos.
When you refuse to react, you deny others the game they're used to playing. They insult you, and you don't bite. They pressure you, and you don't flinch. They expect a performance, and you give them silence. Suddenly, the balance shifts. Suddenly, they're the ones scrambling, over-explaining, oversharing, trying to pull something from you that you refuse to give. That restraint, that calm, is not weakness. It is the sharpest form of power, because it flips the dynamic. It forces the other side to spend energy while you conserve yours. It makes them expose their insecurities while you reveal nothing. It forces them to react while you remain the anchor. And here's the paradox. The man who says the least is often assumed to know the most. The man who doesn't scramble for validation is often the one others end up chasing. Why? Because uncertainty is powerful. Human beings are terrified of not knowing. When someone is expressive, emotional, predictable, they're easy to read, easy to control, easy to manipulate. But the person who gives you nothing, he becomes a mystery. And mysteries are irresistible. History's most powerful figures understood this. Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, even modern leaders and business titans. They knew that control of perception was more valuable than any army or fortune. Appear calm in chaos, and people believe you are in control. Appear composed in defeat, and people assume you cannot be broken. Confidence is not in the noise you make. It's in the silence you maintain. This is what I call the nonchalant man. He doesn't react to every word, every insult, every temptation to prove himself. He knows that attention is currency, and he refuses to waste it. While the world trades reactions like pennies, he guards his energy like gold, and that restraint makes him dangerous. That calmness makes him magnetic. That silence makes him powerful. Now pause and think about your own life. How often have you given away your power by reacting too quickly? How often have you tried to fill the silence because it felt uncomfortable? How often have you explained yourself, justified yourself, defended yourself when you didn't need to? Every time you do that, you spend currency, you lose leverage, and you don't even realize it. But the man of true confidence doesn't play by those rules. He flips the script. He refuses to be rushed. He refuses to be provoked. He refuses to let insecurity set his tempo. His stillness becomes his weapon. His silence becomes his shield. His calmness becomes the edge that cuts deeper than anger ever could. That's why the calmest man in the room is always the most powerful. He's not the one yelling. He's not the one flexing. He's not the one demanding to be noticed. He's the one who could sit in absolute silence, say nothing, do nothing, and still shift the energy of everyone around him. That is the essence of nonchalance. And once you master it, the world begins to bend toward your rhythm. So the real question isn't how loud can you be? It's how silent can you remain? How much pressure can you withstand without reacting? How much chaos can you absorb without breaking your composure? Because that's where confidence becomes unshakable. That's where presence becomes power. That's where nonchalance transforms from a personality trait into a weapon of strategy. And that's exactly what we start going to explore. Power is not measured in strength alone. It is measured in where you spend your attention. Every look, every reaction, every word you give away. It's currency. And the nonchalant man understands this better than anyone. Most people spend attention recklessly. Someone insults them. They immediately lash back. Someone questions them. They jump to defend themselves. Someone tries to bait them, and they fall straight into the trap. They don't even realize that each time they react, they are paying out their most valuable currency. Attention is power. When you react, you are admitting that someone else's words or actions were strong enough to move you. You are proving that they touched a nerve. You are showing that their behavior controlled yours. And in that moment, you've lost leverage. Now think of the opposite. Think of the man who refuses to play that game. He doesn't flinch when provoked. He doesn't scramble to explain. He doesn't waste words trying to prove his worth. Instead, he holds his energy like a fortress. He guards it with precision. He pays out nothing unless it serves him. Suddenly, the roles reverse. The one who sought control is now exposed as powerless. That's why nonchalance frustrates rivals. They swing wildly, expecting a reaction, and they get nothing. They insult, they pressure, they tempt, but their words fall into silence, and silence terrifies them. Because silence is a mirror. It forces them to see their own desperation reflected back. It also seduces allies. Why? Because restraint is rare. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the one who doesn't chase attention becomes the one everyone wants attention from. His words are scarce, therefore valuable. His presence is limited, therefore magnetic. He doesn't flood the world with his availability. He makes people work for his time, and in doing so, he becomes the center of gravity. Think about it. Diamonds are valuable, not because they're loud, but because they're scarce. Gold doesn't scream its worth, its rarity makes people chase it. The same principle applies to human presence. The man who gives nothing freely makes people crave the little he does give. The man who withholds his energy makes every glance, every word, every movement count 10 times more. And here's the brilliance. When you stop reacting to everything, you force others to react to you. You set the rhythm. You decide when the conversation moves forward. You determine what matters and what doesn't. People start calibrating themselves around you, not because you demanded it, but because your restraint creates a vacuum, and human nature hates vacuums. This is why great negotiators often win by saying less. The more silence they allow, the more the other side talks. The more they wait, the more the other side reveals. The same principle works in life. The nonchalant man knows that urgency is often an illusion. When others panic, he stays still. When others scramble, he observes. And in that stillness, he sees what they miss. He notices their tells, their weaknesses, their hidden fears. Now imagine two men in conflict. One is loud, defensive, emotional. The other says nothing. Who do you think holds the power? The loud one exposes himself. Every reaction gives away his position. Every emotional flicker reveals his insecurity. The quiet one reveals nothing. He forces the loud man to show his entire hand while keeping his own hidden. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that power is perception. The man who appears untouched is treated as untouchable. Even if he feels the same pressures inside, his refusal to show it makes others believe he is stronger. And once they believe it, it becomes reality. Nonchalance is not laziness, it's mastery. It's the ability to say, I will not spend my energy unless it buys me leverage. That kind of discipline is rare. Most people can't hold silence without filling it. Most people can't resist reacting. Most people can't stay still when provoked. But those who can, those who treat attention like currency, build an aura that no amount of noise can compete with. And here's where the strategy deepens. When others realize you won't chase, they start chasing you. When others realize you won't defend, they start defending themselves. When others realize you won't explain, they over-explain. They give you more than you ever needed, just to fill the gap your silence creates. And in that moment, you win without moving. This is why the nonchalant man is feared, respected, and desired all at once. He isn't playing the same game as everyone else. He's not trying to win by out-talking, out-posturing, or out-performing. He wins by refusing to play. He wins by holding his power, not spending it. He wins by making others bankrupt themselves while his wealth of composure only grows. So ask yourself, where are you wasting attention? Who are you reacting to without realizing it? How many people are profiting from your emotional energy while you get nothing in return? Once you start seeing attention as currency, everything changes. You stop giving it away for free. You stop spending it on those who don't deserve it. And you start holding it like the weapon it truly is. Because in the end, attention is not free. It is the costliest thing you can give. And the man who guards it, the man who makes others earn it, the man who spends it with surgical precision, that man holds the real power. At first glance, nonchalance might look effortless, as if some men are simply born with this ability to remain calm, unreadable, and untouchable. But here's the truth. No one is born nonchalant. It is not a personality trait. It is a discipline, a skill forged through self-control, sharpened through patience, and tested in fire. Most people live on reflex. They are triggered by insults, swayed by emotions, and pulled by every demand of the outside world. Someone mocks them, and they snap. Someone pressures them, and they fold. Someone offers temptation, and they leap without hesitation. They are like puppets on strings, dancing to every pull of circumstance. But the nonchalant man? He cuts those strings. He chooses his movements. He decides when to react, and more importantly, when not to. That choice doesn't come naturally. It comes from training the mind and the body to resist the urge of instant reaction. It comes from building tolerance for silence, for discomfort, for delayed gratification. Because silence is painful for most. To sit in stillness while the world screams for a reaction feels like suffocation. But the disciplined man knows that the longer he waits, the more power he accumulates. Consider this in chess. The best players aren't the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who can sit with the tension of the board, who can look at 100 possibilities without being rushed into the wrong one. The impatient player moves too soon. The disciplined player waits until the timing is perfect. Nonchalance is the same game, played not on a board but in life. And here is where the power multiplies. Because when you are not reactive, you become unpredictable. The reactive man is easy to read. His emotions betray him. His responses are automatic. He is an open book, and open books are easy to exploit. But the man who holds stillness, he's a locked vault. No one knows what's inside, what he's thinking, or what he might do next. That uncertainty creates fear, and fear creates leverage. Think about negotiations. The man who rushes to fill silence, who feels compelled to explain, almost always gives away too much. He shows his position, his desperation, his limits. The disciplined man sits quietly. He lets the silence stretch, and in that unbearable quiet, the other side cracks first. They reveal more. They offer more. They bend further than they intended, just to escape the tension of not knowing. Nonchalance turns silence into a blade sharper than words. But here's the catch. Discipline is hard. It requires resisting the most natural human impulse to prove yourself, to fight back, to defend, to show you're in control. That impulse is primal, rooted deep in survival instincts, and yet the nonchalant man trains himself to resist it. He knows that the more he feels the urge to react, the more power there is in not doing so. It is restraint that makes him dangerous. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can shout. Anyone can react. But very few can sit in the storm and remain composed. That's why restraint feels like power. Because it is. It tells the world, nothing you do can move me. I remain centered. And that signal sends ripples of unease through anyone watching. Nonchalance is not about suppressing emotions. It is about mastering them. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you control what you reveal. You might feel anger. You might feel pressure. You might feel the pull to prove yourself, but you don't give that power away. You sit with it. You channel it. You decide when, where, and how it's expressed. That is discipline. And make no mistake, people notice. They may not consciously realize it, but they feel it. The one who reacts too quickly is easy prey. The one who reveals too much is easily manipulated. But the one who remains unreadable, he becomes the unknown factor everyone has to account for. He becomes the man who shifts the energy of the room simply by refusing to play the same game as everyone else. That's why rivals find him infuriating. They can't predict him, can't provoke him, can't pull him off center. They swing harder, push further, bait louder, and still, nothing. That nothingness eats at them. It makes them reckless. It makes them lose balance. And while they stumble in desperation, the disciplined man remains unmoved, watching, waiting, choosing his moment. This is the battlefield of psychology. The war is not in fists or weapons, but in composure. The side that loses control first loses power, and most people lose control, not because they are weak, but because they never trained for restraint. They never learned the art of doing nothing, when everything in them screams to do something. That's the difference between ordinary men and those who embody nonchalance. So the next time you feel the pull to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to react instantly, pause. That pause is where discipline lives. That pause is where nonchalance begins, and the longer you can hold it, the more others reveal, the more others project, the more others exhaust themselves trying to move you. Because here's the secret. The nonchalant man rarely needs to fight battles. His enemies defeat themselves in the silence he creates. His rivals unravel while he remains whole. His calmness isn't laziness. It's mastery. It's proof that he has trained himself to resist the greatest temptation of all, the need to react. Power doesn't always come from what is real. More often, it comes from what people believe is real. Perception is reality in the eyes of the world, and those who understand this rule can shape influence far beyond their actual means. The nonchalant man knows this. He understands that if he appears unshaken, others treat him as if he is unshakable, and soon, the perception hardens into truth. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote that a ruler should always appear calm even when the kingdom was crumbling. Why? Because panic spreads faster than fire. The moment a leader shows fear, it multiplies in the minds of his people. But if that leader stands tall, unmoved, composed, even if his heart pounds within, the people borrow his strength. They believe in his steadiness, and their belief keeps the structure intact. Confidence, in this sense, is contagious, but so is fear. The same principle applies everywhere, in business, in relationships, in everyday life. People are constantly scanning you, consciously and unconsciously, for signals. They look for cracks in your armor. They look for tells in your reactions. They look for evidence of your certainty or your doubt. And once they believe they've seen it, they react accordingly. This is why nonchalance is so powerful. It is not merely silence. It is silence weaponized into perception. When you refuse to react, others are forced to fill in the blanks themselves. They wonder, what does he know that I don't? Why isn't he worried? Why isn't he rushing? And in that wondering, they begin to inflate your presence in their own minds. Your stillness becomes a signal. Your lack of response becomes a strategy. Your silence becomes a blade, cutting not by force, but by imagination. Because the human mind hates uncertainty, it prefers a bad answer to no answer at all. And when you give no reaction, no clear signal, no obvious emotion, people project their own fears and insecurities onto you. You become larger than life, not because of what you say, but because of what you withhold. Consider a negotiation. One side lays out terms, the other side reacts instantly, flustered, eager, desperate to be heard. The first side knows they've won, because the reaction gave away the pressure. Now picture the opposite. One side makes a demand. The nonchalant man says nothing. He simply waits. He lets the silence expand until it becomes unbearable. The other side starts second-guessing themselves. Did they ask for too much? Did they miscalculate? They adjust, they explain. They lower the stakes, all without him saying a word. That is perception creating reality. Or think about relationships. The man who is always available, always chasing, always reacting to every message becomes predictable. His presence loses weight. But the man who does not flinch, who does not rush, who does not reveal desperation, he is perceived as more valuable. Scarcity makes diamonds precious, and restraint makes attention magnetic. He is not more powerful because of what he has. He is more powerful because of what others believe about him. And here lies the essence. Nonchalance is psychological warfare. You do not have to attack directly. You do not have to raise your voice or assert dominance outwardly. Instead, you create a fog of uncertainty. You give no pattern, no predictable behavior. You move when you decide, not when pushed. And in that unpredictability, others hesitate. And hesitation is where power lives. Because once they hesitate, they lose rhythm. Once they second-guess, they reveal weakness. Once they doubt, you already control the field. They are reacting to shadows, while you stand still in clarity. That is the paradox. By doing less, you achieve more. By showing nothing, you create the illusion of everything. This is why silence unnerves people. It forces them to look inward. It exposes their own noise, their own insecurity, their own desperation. And while they scramble for clarity, The nonchalant man remains calm, deliberate, untouchable. His composure becomes the battlefield itself, and in that battlefield, he is undefeatable. But let's be clear, this is not about faking strength you don't have. Pretending can only last so long before the mask slips. The true essence of nonchalance is not pretending you are unmoved. It is becoming unmoved. It is cultivating such discipline, such inner stability, that silence is not an act, but your natural state. And when it is real, the perception becomes permanent. Because people don't just respond to what you say, they respond to the energy you project. If you project chaos, they treat you as chaotic. If you project desperation, they treat you as desperate. But if you project calmness, they treat you as unshakable. And soon, that belief hardens into reality. They adjust themselves around you, lower their voices, measure their words, hesitate in their actions. And all of this happens because perception, once planted, grows into truth. That is the genius of nonchalance. It doesn't just protect you from attack, it transforms you into a figure others can't easily define, can't easily predict, can't easily control. You become the unknown. And in human psychology, the unknown is always feared, always respected, always given more weight than it may even deserve. So remember this: the world may never know what is inside you, but they will always act according to what they perceive. Guard that perception carefully. Cultivate nonchalance as your armor, because when you appear untouchable, people treat you as if you are, and in time, that treatment becomes reality. Throughout history, the most powerful figures weren't always the ones who shouted the loudest, swung the hardest, or ruled with constant displays of force. More often, they were the ones who mastered composure. The leaders who understood that presence, restraint, and timing were greater weapons than brute strength. Nonchalance, in this sense, is not new. It has been the silent strategy of kings, generals, and visionaries for centuries. Take Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. Rome was besieged with chaos during his reign. Wars at the borders, political intrigue within the Senate, plagues sweeping through the population. And yet, Aurelius rarely raised his voice. His writings and meditations reveal a man who understood that composure was not just personal virtue, but a tool of governance. His soldiers respected him because he did not panic in crisis. His people trusted him because he projected steadiness in uncertainty. Rome held together not because he had all the answers, but because he never appeared shaken. Or consider Abraham Lincoln. During the American Civil War, his country was tearing itself apart. Advisors, generals, and rivals constantly pressured him for decisions. Many expected him to lash out, to fold, to reveal his doubts. Instead, Lincoln mastered the art of deliberate pause. He often sat quietly, listening, while others exhausted themselves. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of silence. That restraint made him not only respected, but also feared by his political enemies. Even in business, nonchalance has been a weapon. Think of Warren Buffett, often called the Oracle of Omaha. Buffett built one of the greatest fortunes in history, not by chasing trends or reacting to market noise, but by staying calm when everyone else panicked. While the world scrambled during market crashes, Buffett remained composed. His calm presence became legendary, and investors placed their trust in him not simply for his intellect, but for his refusal to be rattled. This pattern repeats again and again. The calmest man in the storm always becomes the anchor others cling to. And it's not magic, it's psychology. In chaos, humans instinctively look for stability. The one who projects steadiness becomes the leader, whether or not he sought the role. Nonchalance in these moments is more than defense. It becomes strategy. But it's not only about history's heroes. Nonchalance has also been a weapon of manipulation. Think of Machiavelli's insights in The Prince. He advised rulers to appear composed, even when plotting ruthlessness, appear generous, but calculate in silence, appear merciful, but move strategically. Why? Because perception creates loyalty, fear, and respect more effectively than force ever could. A tyrant who rages reveals insecurity. A ruler who appears unmoved, even while tightening control, becomes nearly impossible to challenge. Strategic restraint also dismantles manipulation. Propaganda, baiting, and guilt only work on those who react. The moment you lash out against slander, you confirm its sting. The moment you protest guilt, you validate the accusation. But the nonchalant man sees through the tactic. He recognizes that most manipulation relies on reaction, and by withholding it, he robs the manipulator of their weapon. They grow frustrated. They overextend. They expose their true motives. And in the end, their strategy collapses under the weight of their own desperation. Nonchalance shifts the battlefield in business as well. In negotiations, the one who speaks least often secures the best terms. The one who refuses to rush into a deal often walks away with the greatest leverage, because urgency is a tool others use to pressure you. If you succumb, you give away your power. But if you remain calm, deliberate, and nonchalant, the pressure reverses. The other side begins to question themselves. They sweeten the terms. They work harder to win you. The same holds true in relationships. The person who can walk away without flinching always has the upper hand, not because they don't care, but because they refuse to be controlled by desperation. Their restraint sends a message: I am whole without you. My value is not dependent on your approval. That message creates respect, and often it creates pursuit. Leadership, too, depends on this principle. Imagine a crisis, a company collapsing, a battlefield crumbling, a family falling apart. Most people panic, and in their panic, they look for someone to steady them. The leader who screams, who flails, who reveals fear, only spreads chaos. But the leader who remains composed, who speaks calmly, who projects unshaken confidence, becomes the figure everyone gravitates toward. Nonchalance, in this case, becomes more than strategy. It becomes survival. History rewards those who understand this dynamic, from generals who won battles without swinging a sword, to CEOs who turned silence into billion-dollar decisions, to rulers who commanded loyalty through sheer composure. The lesson is the same. Power flows to the one who appears in control, whether or not they truly are. And when others believe in your control, they act as if it is real. Their belief strengthens your position until perception becomes indistinguishable from reality. That is the true genius of nonchalance. It is not passive. It is not apathy. It is active control. It is restraint as weapon, calmness as armor, silence as strategy. It is the ability to bend perception until the world treats you as untouchable, and then to use that perception as leverage in every arena of life. Mystery has always held power over the human mind. From ancient oracles to modern celebrities, the figures who reveal the least often command the most fascination. Nonchalance feeds directly into this psychology, creating an aura that is difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. When a man is calm, unreadable, and reserved, he becomes something rare in a world addicted to noise, and rarity breeds intrigue. The mystique effect begins with absence. Most people are constantly available, answering every message instantly, reacting to every comment, flooding conversations with endless words. Their presence is predictable, and predictability kills curiosity. But the nonchalant man withdraws. He is not always present. He does not respond to everything. His words are scarce. His time is limited. And that scarcity makes him valuable. Think of it like economics. Abundance devalues. Scarcity elevates. If gold were as common as sand, no one would chase it. If diamonds grew on every tree, no one would pay for them. In the same way, when attention and presence are freely given, they lose weight. But when they are rationed, withheld, and carefully distributed, they become precious. This is why people lean in when the nonchalant man speaks. It's not just the content of his words, it's the rarity of them. He doesn't flood the room with chatter. He doesn't fill silence for the sake of filling it. He speaks sparingly, and that economy of language forces others to pay attention. Every word becomes amplified because there are so few, and when he remains silent, the effect deepens. Silence itself becomes a mystery. Others begin to project onto it. They ask themselves, what is he thinking? Why isn't he reacting? Is he confident, or is he planning something bigger? That uncertainty gnaws at them. It creates a fog of possibilities, and in that fog, the nonchalant man grows larger in their imagination than he may even be in reality. This is projection at work. Human beings cannot stand blanks. When faced with an empty canvas, they will paint their own fears, desires, and assumptions onto it. When the nonchalant man gives no cues, others fill the void themselves. Some imagine he is dangerous. Some imagine he is brilliant. Some imagine he is cold, calculating, strategic, but all agree on one thing: he is not ordinary. Mystique is not built on action, but on restraint. It is not in revealing everything, but in revealing selectively. It is not in being endlessly visible, but in being strategically scarce. Think of the most captivating figures in history and culture. They are not the ones who told their entire story to everyone. They are the ones who withheld, who left gaps, who allowed imagination to do the rest. Even in modern life, mystique is magnetic. The celebrity who doesn't overexpose themselves becomes iconic. The leader who doesn't scramble for press attention becomes respected. The individual who doesn't chase validation suddenly becomes the one others seek validation from. Scarcity flips the dynamic of power. But mystique isn't just about scarcity, it's also about unpredictability. The man who always reacts the same way becomes easy to read, but the man who withholds, who breaks silence only when it matters, who moves only at decisive moments, creates an air of unpredictability, and unpredictability forces caution. Rivals hesitate, allies lean in, admirers become obsessed. And here's the paradox: you don't need to be extraordinary to be perceived as extraordinary. You only need to reveal less. The less people know, the more they assume. The less they hear, the more they imagine. The less you give, the more they chase. This is why mystique is so powerful. It turns restraint into allure. But mystique also requires control. Too much silence, and you risk being seen as absent or irrelevant. Too much scarcity, and you risk being forgotten. The art lies in balance, giving just enough to spark curiosity, but never so much that the mystery disappears. Like a skilled storyteller, you reveal pieces of the plot while keeping the audience hungry for the next chapter. Nonchalance makes mystique sustainable because it isn't about acting mysterious or playing games. It's about genuine composure, genuine restraint, genuine discipline. It's about being so centered in yourself that you don't need to prove, explain, or perform. And when that composure is real, it naturally creates the aura others interpret as depth, power, and control. The mystique effect transforms perception. Suddenly, the nonchalant man becomes more than a person. He becomes a puzzle, and puzzles are irresistible. People analyze him, discuss him, speculate about him. His silence becomes the subject of conversations. His absence becomes louder than most people's presence. His rare words linger longer than others' endless chatter. That is the essence of mystique, the ability to command fascination without force, to make others chase what they can't fully possess, to become larger in imagination than in reality. And once you understand this, you stop wasting energy trying to prove yourself. You stop trying to be louder, flashier, more impressive. Instead, you let the silence do the work. You let scarcity build the aura. You let projection turn you into something greater than you could ever construct on your own. Because in the end, mystique is not about creating illusion. It's about mastering restraint so thoroughly that others create the illusion for you. And that illusion, born from their own minds, is often more powerful than anything you could ever say or show. The world moves fast. Notifications ping, voices compete, and attention is pulled in 1,000 directions. Most people allow themselves to be carried by this current, reacting to every demand, rushing to every impulse, and exhausting themselves in the process. But the nonchalant man does something different. He slows down. He sets his own rhythm, and in doing so, he becomes the gravitational center in any room. Presence is not about being the loudest or the most visible. It is about energy. Some people walk into a room and instantly change the atmosphere, not because they announce themselves, but because their composure radiates weight. They move slower, speak less, and yet everyone else unconsciously adjusts to their pace. Their calmness bends the tempo of the environment. That is presence, the ability to make the world follow your rhythm instead of being pulled into its chaos. Think about a conductor in an orchestra. The musicians hold their instruments, waiting, ready to burst into sound. But they do not play until the conductor moves. One small motion of the hand sets the entire rhythm. Nonchalance works the same way. When you refuse to rush, others hesitate. When you remain composed, others measure themselves against you. When you withhold, others lean in. Your rhythm becomes the one they unconsciously follow. And this rhythm is not frantic. It is deliberate. The nonchalant man does not scramble for validation. He does not compete for attention. He does not chase opportunities as if they will vanish without him. He knows that what is meant for him will arrive in its time, and so he moves with patience. That patience creates an aura of control. While others are frantic, he is steady, and steadiness in a world of urgency looks like power. Scarcity deepens this effect. The man who is constantly available is taken for granted, but the one whose presence is rare becomes magnetic. When he enters the room, it matters. When he speaks, it matters. When he acts, it shifts the dynamic, because people aren't used to it. His scarcity creates gravity. It forces others to value his presence precisely because it cannot be assumed. This is why brevity in speech is such a powerful tool. The nonchalant man does not drown conversations with endless words. He doesn't feel the need to explain every thought, defend every action, or prove every point. Instead, he uses economy. He speaks with intention, often in fewer words than expected. And because those words are rare, they carry weight, they linger, they echo. People replay them in their minds long after the conversation ends. Contrast this with the person who overtalks, who fills every silence with noise, who explains and re-explains until nothing of value remains. Their words are abundant, and abundance devalues. But the man who speaks rarely forces others to read between the lines. His pauses are studied. His silences are heavy. His presence in conversation is not just about what he says, but about what he withholds. This combination, Scarcity of presence, scarcity of speech, and control of rhythm creates a gravitational pull. Others cannot help but orbit around it. They measure themselves against his steadiness. They adjust their voices, slow their movements, and change their energy in his presence. He does not demand authority. His presence writes the rules. And when he does act, it feels seismic. Because action is rare, it becomes amplified. The same gesture that would be ignored from someone else carries weight from him. A single word becomes decisive. A small movement becomes commanding. The world has learned to watch him closely because he has trained them to expect significance in his scarcity. This is why the nonchalant man becomes unpredictable. If you are always talking, people stop listening. If you are always present, people stop noticing. If you are always reacting, people stop respecting. But when you withdraw, when you restrain, when you act with precision, you maintain mystery. People lean in because they don't know when you will act next, and that anticipation keeps you powerful. Rhythm is also about knowing when to pause. The pause is one of the greatest tools of nonchalance. It creates tension. It makes others uncomfortable. It forces them to reveal more than they intended just to escape the silence. The pause is where you see their true selves, their fears, their insecurities, their desperation. While they scramble, you observe. While they reveal, you calculate. While they waste energy, you conserve yours. In this way, rhythm is not just about timing, it is about control. He who controls the tempo controls the interaction. He who dictates the pace dictates the outcome. That is why the calmest man in the room always wins. Not because he has more strength, but because everyone else eventually sinks to his gravity. And once you control rhythm, you control perception. Your scarcity becomes your power. Your composure becomes your language. Your silence becomes your weapon. People sense that you are not like the rest. You do not move at their tempo. You do not react to their noise. You do not scramble for their approval. You have set your own rhythm, and now they dance to it. This is the gravitational force of nonchalance. It is subtle. It is invisible. But it is undeniable. The more you master it, the more others adjust themselves around you without even realizing it. They slow down. They measure their tone. They watch their words. They wait for your moves. You don't chase the room. The room chases you. At its core, nonchalance is not about caring less. It's about caring selectively. It's not detachment from life, but discipline in choosing what deserves your attention and what does not. Most people scatter their energy across everything. Every argument, every rumor, every temptation, every little drama that crosses their path. And in doing so, they dilute themselves. Their focus becomes cheap because it's spent everywhere. The nonchalant man, however, spends his attention like gold. He doesn't invest it in petty conflicts or shallow validation. He doesn't waste it on proving himself to those who don't matter. He doesn't react to every spark of noise demanding his energy. Instead, he chooses carefully. His selectivity transforms his focus into power, because when he does care, when he does act, it carries undeniable weight. This is why nonchalance is so often mistaken for apathy. On the surface, it looks like indifference, but look closer, and you'll see precision. The nonchalant man may care deeply about his goals, his vision, his inner peace, his chosen relationships. He simply refuses to waste energy on anything that doesn't align with those priorities. That refusal is what gives him strength. Think of it like a warrior sharpening his blade. If he swings at every shadow, the edge dulls quickly. But if he waits, if he reserves his strikes for moments that matter, his blade remains sharp and devastating. The nonchalant man sharpens his life the same way. His restraint is not because he feels nothing, but because he values his energy too much to squander it. Most people chase validation as if it were oxygen. They explain themselves endlessly. They argue with critics. They defend against every accusation. They waste countless hours and emotions trying to control how others see them. But the nonchalant man knows that validation is a trap. The moment you chase it, you hand over your power. You let others decide your worth. And once you've done that, you will always be at their mercy. Instead, he sets his own terms. He doesn't scramble for approval because he already approves of himself. He doesn't need to explain his worth because he lives it quietly. He doesn't fight to be understood by everyone because he knows not everyone deserves access to his truth. This selectivity confuses people at first. They expect him to react, to explain, to prove. When he doesn't, they lean in harder. They start chasing what he refuses to give. This is why his presence feels heavier. He is not everywhere, not always available, not constantly performing. He is deliberate. He chooses when to engage, when to speak, when to appear. And because it is rare, it becomes valuable. People sense that when he shows up, it matters. When he gives attention, it is genuine. When he invests energy, it is purposeful. Even in relationships, this selectivity creates power. The man who is desperate, who floods others with constant availability, is quickly taken for granted. But the one who knows his value, who can walk away without flinching, who doesn't hand over his energy cheaply, he becomes the one others pursue. Not because he withholds out of arrogance, but because his restraint signals worth. Scarcity breeds desire. In business too, this discipline changes the game. The entrepreneur who chases every opportunity burns out. The leader who tries to fight every battle loses focus. But the one who selects carefully, who says no more often than yes, who invests only where the return is real, that is the one who builds lasting empires. Selectivity, not abundance, creates strength. And here is the deeper layer. Selectivity changes not only how others see you, but how you see yourself. When you stop reacting to everything, you begin to feel more centered. When you stop chasing validation, you feel more free. When you stop wasting energy on noise, you find clarity. Your mind quiets. Your actions sharpen. You begin to realize just how much power you once gave away without noticing. The world is full of distractions, designed to pull you off center. Advertisements scream for your attention. Social media tempts you to compare. Critics bait you into defense. Enemies push you toward reaction. And most people spend their lives reacting to these forces, never realizing how much of their power is leaking away. But the nonchalant man seals those leaks. He asks, does this deserve my energy? Does this align with my purpose? Will this serve my growth, my clarity, my strength? If the answer is no, he remains silent. He remains still. He remains untouchable. This discipline is rare. It requires self-awareness and constant practice. But once mastered, it creates an aura that is impossible to fake. Others feel it. They instinctively lower their voices in his presence. They weigh their words. They soften their demands. Why? Because they sense his focus cannot be bought cheaply. They know his attention is not given lightly. They respect the gravity of his restraint. And that is the secret. Nonchalance is not about caring less, but about caring right. It is not about shutting yourself off from the world, but about choosing what matters most. It is not about being detached from life, but about living it with such discipline that every movement, every word, every moment carries intention. The nonchalant man doesn't spend his energy recklessly. He invests it, and because of that, he multiplies it. His selectivity creates leverage. His restraint creates magnetism. His priorities create power. And in a world addicted to urgency, noise, and chaos, his deliberate calm makes him the rarest figure of all. Up to this point, we've seen nonchalance as defense, a shield against manipulation, a wall against chaos, a fortress against insecurity. But restraint is not only a way to protect yourself, it is also a way to attack. Properly used, nonchalance becomes an offensive weapon, capable of dismantling rivals without you ever lifting your voice. The brilliance of this strategy lies in how it sets traps. When you appear indifferent, others assume they have the advantage. They think you are unaware, unconcerned, or unmotivated. They mistake silence for weakness, and in doing so, they overextend, they push harder, they reveal more. They underestimate you, and just when they believe they've won, you strike with precision, not loudly, not recklessly, but surgically. This is the art of baiting without baiting. You don't lure with words or false promises, you lure with absence. Your stillness makes people uncomfortable. They begin to project assumptions onto you. He's not reacting, so maybe he's hiding something. He's not fighting back, so maybe he's planning something bigger. Their imagination does more damage than any argument could. And in that fog of uncertainty, they make mistakes. Consider a rival who tries to provoke you. Most men would react instantly, defending themselves, lashing out, or scrambling to prove worth. But the nonchalant man doesn't take the bait. He lets the insults hang in the air, unanswered. He gives no satisfaction, no signal, no flicker of weakness. The rival grows frustrated. He pushes harder, becoming reckless, and in his desperation to get a response, he exposes his own insecurity. He defeats himself while you remain untouched. In negotiations, this offense is even more devastating. Imagine sitting across the table from someone trying to pressure you into a deal. They raise their voice. They cite deadlines. They attempt to corner you. Most people would fold under that tension, but the nonchalant man leans back, silent, calm, unaffected. He doesn't chase. He doesn't rush. His stillness forces the other side to question their tactics. Did they misplay their hand? Did they ask for too much? The longer the silence stretches, the weaker they become. Eventually, they begin offering concessions just to regain balance. Without saying a word, you've shifted the deal in your favor. Relationships, too, reveal the offensive power of nonchalance. When one person withdraws emotionally, the other often overcompensates. They overshare. They beg for clarity. They seek reassurance. The nonchalant man doesn't do this to manipulate out of cruelty, but his calm refusal to be rushed creates a dynamic where others reveal themselves. They show their insecurities, their intentions, their vulnerabilities, not because you demanded it, but because they couldn't handle the silence. This offensive use of restraint is what makes nonchalance so dangerous. Most people equate aggression with action, shouting, pushing, attacking, dominating. But true aggression, true control, often looks like stillness. It is the calm stare that unnerves more than a scream. It is the long pause that feels heavier than an argument. It is the quiet refusal that makes others collapse under their own noise. Think of the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote that the greatest strike is the one that comes without warning. His duels were won not just with skill, but with timing. He would hold back, unreadable, until his opponent was exhausted by anticipation. Then he would strike once, clean, decisive, final. Nonchalance works the same way. You reveal nothing, you withhold everything, until the moment comes, and when you finally move, it is devastating precisely because it was so rare. This is why restraint is not weakness. It is delayed precision. It is the difference between swinging wildly in desperation and landing a single blow that ends the conflict. The nonchalant man knows that energy is finite. He saves his for the moments that matter. He doesn't react to noise, but when he finally acts, it feels like an earthquake. But there's another dimension to this offensive power: unpredictability. When you give no consistent pattern, no predictable reaction, you become impossible to read. And what cannot be read cannot be controlled. Rivals second-guess every move. Allies lean in with respect. Enemies hesitate. That hesitation is your victory, because the moment someone hesitates, they lose momentum, and momentum is often the deciding factor in power struggles. Nonchalance also creates psychological traps. People crave emotional feedback. They want to know where they stand, whether they've won, whether they've gotten through to you. When you give them nothing, they begin to spin stories in their own heads. They imagine threats where there are none. They invent strategies that don't exist. They start playing against themselves, and while they spiral, you remain centered, watching, calculating, waiting. This is how silence becomes offense. It forces others to move first. It reveals their hands before you reveal yours. It makes them expose weaknesses while you remain unreadable. And when you finally choose to act, the path is clear because they've already shown you where they are vulnerable. The nonchalant man does not fight every battle. He does not rush into every conflict. He lets others exhaust themselves first. He lets them make the noise, the mistakes, the reveals. Then, when the moment comes, he strikes not with frenzy, but with precision. And because no one saw it coming, the strike lands with disproportionate force. This is the quiet weapon of nonchalance. It does not announce itself. It does not roar. It waits. It watches. It withholds. And then, at the perfect moment, it cuts deeper than any display of aggression ever could. Every weapon has two edges. Nonchalance, when mastered, can make you magnetic, unreadable, and powerful. But when misunderstood or misapplied, it can turn against you. The same silence that creates mystique can also create distance. The same restraint that builds respect can erode trust. The same composure that commands power can harden into coldness. And if you are not careful, nonchalance can become your cage. The first trap is paralysis. Some men confuse nonchalance with inaction. They hold back not out of control, but out of fear. They hesitate when decisiveness is required. They let opportunities pass because they convince themselves that waiting is always the stronger move. But hesitation is not power. It is stagnation. A general who refuses to give orders in battle doesn't project composure. He loses his army. A leader who delays every decision doesn't appear strategic. He appears weak. Nonchalance must never become an excuse for cowardice. Its power lies in choosing stillness, not defaulting to it. The second trap is indifference. Nonchalance is about discipline, not detachment. It is about prioritizing, not ignoring. But if you wear the mask too long, you risk losing your ability to engage deeply. You may start mistaking emotional connection for vulnerability. You may avoid intimacy altogether, fearing that showing care will break your aura of composure. In truth, the most powerful figures in history knew when to show warmth as well as when to show restraint. A ruler who is cold in war must be warm at the campfire. A man who is unreadable to rivals must be present to those he loves. Nonchalance without balance corrodes relationships. The third trap is invisibility. In trying to remain scarce and mysterious, some men remove themselves so much that they fade into irrelevance. They are not remembered as powerful. They are simply forgotten. Presence is a weapon precisely because it is rare. But if it becomes non-existent, it loses value. Nonchalance must be paired with decisive action at the right times. The strike must eventually come. The silence must eventually break. Otherwise, people stop waiting and move on. The fourth trap is resentment. Nonchalance unsettles people, and sometimes it unsettles the wrong ones. Rivals may grow frustrated. Enemies may grow bitter, but allies too may feel unseen if you never show your hand. Too much distance, and they begin to question your loyalty. Too much composure, and they wonder if you care at all. Trust requires moments of vulnerability, moments of humanity. A man who never reveals anything risks being perceived not as strong but as hollow. The fifth trap is self-deception. This is the most dangerous of all. When you wear the mask of composure too long, you may begin to believe it is your identity. You forget that it is a tool, a strategy, an armor. You start to confuse restraint with strength in all circumstances, even when decisiveness is required. You start to believe that appearing calm is always better than taking bold action, and in that belief, you become trapped by your own myth. The mask becomes your prison. Machiavelli himself warned of this danger. A prince must adapt, he said. Sometimes he must be like a fox, sometimes like a lion, sometimes he must remain still, and sometimes he must strike. Nonchalance is one tool among many, but if it becomes your only tool, it will eventually fail you. Adaptability, not rigidity, is the mark of true power. So how do you avoid these traps? By remembering that nonchalance is not the absence of emotion, but the control of it. It is not the denial of action, but the timing of it. It is not detachment from life, but selectivity about what deserves your energy. It is a scalpel, not a shield to hide behind. The art lies in knowing when to remain silent and when to break the silence, when to hold back and when to move forward, when to appear untouched and when to let others see that you bleed. The most dangerous mistake is to believe that nonchalance makes you invulnerable. It doesn't. It makes you disciplined. It gives you leverage. It shapes perception. But if you forget your humanity, if you forget your adaptability, if you forget that composure is a choice and not a default, you risk becoming brittle, and brittle things, no matter how strong they look, eventually break. Nonchalance at its best is a performance, not in the sense of being fake, but in the sense of being intentional. You decide when to wear the mask and when to take it off. You decide when to be stone and when to be fire. You decide when silence serves you and when speech will strike deeper. This flexibility is what separates mastery from self-destruction. So use nonchalance wisely. Wield it as a weapon, but never let it become your only defense. Guard against paralysis. Guard against indifference. Guard against invisibility. Guard against resentment. And above all, guard against believing your own myth, because when you start serving the mask instead of the mask serving you, you've lost the very power you sought to protect. At the end of it all, nonchalance is not about arrogance. It is not about pretending you don't care. It is not about detachment from the world or indifference to people. True nonchalance is sovereignty. It is the ability to rule yourself so completely that no one else can rule you. It is the discipline of restraint, the power of stillness, and the sharpness of timing. And when mastered, it becomes the silent edge that changes every room you enter. The endgame of nonchalance is not to impress others. It is not to intimidate. It is not to build an image of being untouchable. The endgame is to become untouchable in reality. Not because you look unbothered, but because you are. You have trained yourself not to be pulled into chaos. You have retrained your nervous system to remain calm under pressure. You have broken the addiction to reaction, and now You move only when you decide, not when the world demands it. That is the true freedom. Most people live on the world's tempo. They are pinged, prompted, provoked, and pulled in 1,000 directions. They dance to rhythms they don't control. But the nonchalant man plays his own music, at his own volume, at his own pace. And once others realize they can't drag him into their noise, they are forced to slow down, to adjust, to follow his rhythm. That is victory without force. In business, this makes him the anchor in negotiation rooms, the figure who refuses to be rushed into bad deals, the strategist who watches chaos unfold while everyone else panics. In relationships, this makes him the one who cannot be manipulated by neediness or bait, the one who holds the upper hand because he doesn't chase. In leadership, this makes him the calm figure people gravitate toward in storms, the one who embodies stability when others are falling apart. But beyond tactics and strategy, nonchalance transforms the man himself. It reshapes how he experiences life. No longer desperate for approval, he begins to trust his own value. No longer addicted to reaction, he begins to act with clarity. No longer enslaved by urgency, he begins to master timing. He becomes more than just unreadable, he becomes unshakable. And yet the true masters know balance. They know that nonchalance is not about never showing emotion, but about choosing when to show it. They know that too much silence becomes isolation, too much distance becomes coldness, too much restraint becomes paralysis. They understand that the mask is a tool, not an identity, and so they remain adaptable. They can be ice in winter, fire in summer. They can be silent in public, vulnerable in private. They can be composed in crisis and warm at the campfire. This balance is the highest form of strength. The nonchalant man doesn't seek to dominate others. He doesn't need to crush rivals or control every situation. His goal is simpler and far more powerful: mastery of himself. Because once you master yourself, the world bends naturally. People adjust to your gravity. They respect your rhythm. They weigh their words, slow their tone, soften their demands, not because you demanded it, but because your presence makes them. And this is where perception and reality merge. You are no longer performing calmness. You are calm. You are no longer pretending to be in control. You are in control. You are no longer faking restraint. You have built it into your identity. And at that point, nonchalance is no longer strategy. It is who you are. But remember the final warning. Do not become a prisoner of your own myth. Do not confuse restraint with strength in every circumstance. Do not forget that life demands not only silence, but also action, not only stillness, but also movement, not only composure, but also passion. The blade is sharpest when it knows when to remain sheathed and when to strike. So let nonchalance be your discipline, your shield, your weapon, but never your cage. Use it to guard your attention, to build your presence, to shape perception, to disarm rivals, to steady allies, to rule yourself. But also remember to live, to connect, to reveal when the moment calls for it. Because true power is not being unreadable all the time. True power is choosing when to be unreadable and when to let others see your humanity. In the end, stillness is not peace. It is the poised edge of a hidden blade. And the man who masters nonchalance never needs to raise his voice again, because his presence speaks louder than words ever could. That is the end game. Not applause, not intimidation, not noise, but sovereignty. To move through the world untouched by chaos, commanding respect without asking for it, shaping perception without forcing it, and holding your power in silence until the perfect moment to strike. And when you live this way, you don't just win battles, you change the battlefield itself.